The president of the United States, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about any president, has to have immunity. Because if you take immunity away from the president, so important, you will have a president that's not going to be able to do anything. Because when he leaves office, the opposing party president, if it's the opposing party, will indict the president for doing something that should have been good. Like Obama dropped missiles and they ended up hitting a kindergarten or a school or the apartment house. A lot of people were killed. Well, if that's the case, he's going to end up being indicted when he leaves office. He meant well. The missile went in the wrong direction and other things.
And other things. There's so much, Willie, wrong with that.
Wait, wrong? Yeah. What president? He's talking about Obama.
He's still, first of all, we have to get we'll get to the Hitler stuff in a second.
Okay.
But let's start, though, with
I'll make a chart.
The fact that Donald Trump is not well. We know this. But this guy, he's looking so old. He's shuffling around. And he really does think that Barack Obama is still president of the United States. He's going through this thing, and then about why he should have total immunity even when he crosses the line. Right? This is the SEAL Team 6 can assassinate. Yeah. And by the way, Jonah Goldberg, I think it was this morning, Jonah Goldberg tweeted out this morning, what do Trump supporters say who believe that SEAL Team 6 can assassinate political rivals? What do they say if someone says, well, then Joe Biden could order SEAL Team 6 this morning to assassinate Donald Trump? And he would be immune by Donald Trump's arguments. It is pure, sheer authoritarianism and tyranny. So we have that part of it. It is Trump at his most dangerous, but also Trump at his most detached from reality. He's really losing it. We've been getting glimpses now of him shuffling around and looking lost and getting up on stage, talking about World War II, talking about President Obama. And here he did it again and said, listen, President Obama may have bombed kindergartens, but he was trying to do good things. And when he leaves office, he could face a conviction. It's crazy.
Well, Donald Trump was on stage 2 nights ago bragging about how he passed that rudimentary dementia test again. He was very proud of that again. He really leaning into that. Obsessed with Barack Obama, as always. It's the first name that's top of mind. Sometimes it seems like he thinks he's running against Barack Obama. Sometimes he just says that out loud. And to your deeper point about this immunity question, he's saying, well, any president then could prosecute the previous president. First of all, it's the Justice Department. It's not the president, as we've said a million times, who's going after Donald Trump here. And second of all, yeah, if that president breaks laws, if that president attempts a coup against the United States government or takes nuclear secrets back to his beach club or meddles in the Georgia election or is found liable for sexual assault, yeah, that guy might be prosecuted. We like to think that our presidents wouldn't do any of those things. This is a unique case that Donald Trump is trying to make a rule to keep himself out of jail that he says would apply to all other presidents.
Yeah, let's bring in Eugene Robinson. Gene, this is again, Donald Trump once again detached from reality. Again, thinking that, World War II is upon us and he's running against Barack Hussein Obama. That's one part of it. And we've seen images of him over the past couple weeks. He's just not doing well. It doesn't seem physically. Then there's a second part of it, and that is Donald Trump. This was Donald Trump's closing statement. Like poor Sean Hannity. Poor Sean Hannity. He's like a dad that gets a baseball and he puts it on a tee and he goes, come on, Johnny, hit the tee. And Johnny keeps hitting his hand. Sean Hannity has placed more balls on tees only to hear Barack Obama's name come up time and time again. And other Fox News hosts have to correct Donald Trump. No, you're running against Joe Biden. So let's put that on one side. And on the other side, you've got a former president who Republicans look like they're going to nominate, who is saying, I really could get SEAL Team 6 to assassinate my political opponents, and I have to have immunity. That was, Hannity goes, what's your closing statement for the voters? And it's, I need total immunity from everything, even when I cross the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I had that same thought about poor Sean Hannity, and I don't often feel sorry for Sean Hannity, but I did because he had just absolutely teed up the ball, and Donald Trump, hits the lamp on the table or whatever. It was ridiculous. It's like, what more can he do? The thing about Donald Trump, of course, is that he is pure id in the Freudian sense. He just blurts out whatever he's obsessing about. So now what's on his mind. And what's on his mind is trying to stay out of jail. You can just tell from these recent appearances how worried he is that he's going to go to jail. He's going to have to pay massive fines in all these various cases. Who knows how much he'll have to pay to E. Jean Carroll. He's going to have consequences for his actions, not just over his presidency, over his long and his long life in which he crossed the line all the time. He's all about crossing the line, and he is so worried that he's going to have to go to jail that this is what he's thinking about, more than he's thinking about the campaign, more than he's thinking about anything else. He wants to stay out of jail.
Jonathan Lemire, we've said it since 2019. Let me say that again. We've been saying this for 4 years. If Donald Trump loses in 2020, he'll run again. Why? Only because he wants to stay out of jail. That's the entire purpose of his campaign. We've been saying that for 4 years. When people are saying, will Donald Trump run? Joe, do you really think Trump's going to? I go, yes, he is. But no, I go, no. He loves money. If he could cash in and make the money, he would. But right now, he's only focused on staying out of jail. So, of course, he's going to run again here because Trump has lost so many steps. We always talk about how long we've known him, Reverend, now, how long we've known him. We've known him a long time.
Yes, we have.
That guy that I'm watching now, that guy hasn't lost one step. That guy's lost 5, 6, 7 steps. And he still thinks he's running against Barack Obama. And so, he's shuffling around. I seriously, I think it's going to be harder and harder for the campaign to manage this guy who, it's just my opinion, looks like he's in a serious state of decline and seriously is so confused. He's still thinking about the guy that he started the birther conspiracy theory about back in 2011. Still on his mind, can't let it go, and doesn't seem to be in a very good state at all. Just freaked out about immunity. Immunity even when SEAL Team 6 kills his political opponents.
Yeah, I was a Metro reporter with the New York Daily News and covered Trump from time to time 15, 20 years ago. And it's very clear he's not the same guy he was then. And that post about presidential immunity also had the great Trump tell of this era, which is when he goes to all caps. And when he goes to all caps, and it's an all caps screed, particularly about his legal predicaments, it is a window into how upset and anxious he is. And that was a night where he had been posting overnight repeatedly about E. Jean Carroll and other, quote, witch hunts. And then yesterday morning went so far as to say this, to have the needing that full immunity for even events that cross the line. This is something that feels like not only of course, a scary projection of what could come in a second Trump term, where he would say, I could do whatever I want, and I can't be prosecuted. He'd have the Department of Justice.
Jonathan, guess what?
Believe him.
Jonathan, guess what? Yeah, first of all,
this will happen.
Believe him. This will happen if he gets elected again. But Jonathan, that's also, Heilman says everything he says is either projection or confession. There is confession when he says, I crossed the line. Yeah. You've got to give me immunity. I know I've crossed the line. I know that if America's rule of law plays out the way it's supposed to be, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail. That's what the meltdown's all about.
Yeah, I didn't invoke Heilmann's name for fear that he would suddenly just show up here, which we don't want. But certainly, confession. This is projection and confession.
Yeah, okay.
This is projection of what a second term Trump term will be like. But it's a confession to what already happened in the first term. That he says he needs this immunity because he knows he broke the law, that he crossed the line. In any number of cases, we're not sure which one he was freaked about right now. And Willie, we can't say this enough. You know, his spin last night on Fox was like, "Hey, I'm not just asking for total immunity for me. I'm doing it for all presidents." Well, the previous 44 presidents, they didn't need it. None of them had ever faced any criminal charges before. This applies solely to Donald Trump.